Hi, good afternoon. We're going to talk about chapter 10, which deals with the body of the speech. So last week we talked about the introduction and conclusion, which are important, especially in terms of delivery, getting your audience's attention and wrapping up. In terms of the meat of the speech, the body is the most important. So we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about how to determine your main ideas. We're going to look at some common organizational patterns. And then finally, we're going to look at some transition statements and ways to keep your speech moving. So some things to remember about main ideas is that they are key parts that you present to enable your speech to accomplish its specific purpose. So if you remember when we talked about finding a purpose in chapter 6, your specific purpose combines your audience with the general purpose and your topic. So for example, I would say at the end of my speech, my audience will understand how to create an outline. And so then I want to make sure that my main points help me do that. In terms of determining how many main points you should have, for the purposes of this class, or really for the majority of presentations at any time, you should limit your speech to 2 to 3 main points. There have been a ton of research that has indicated that audience members don't remember a lot, and it's easier for them to remember 2 or 3 main ideas that are well supported and developed than 4 or 5 or 6 ideas. One of the things that chapter 10 talks about is that you can brainstorm a list of points that you may want to discuss on a given topic, and then look at ways to combine them, which your book calls chunking. And then finally, when you're combining your main points, you want to ask yourself, do these main points help my audience understand my specific purpose? And if they're not connected to the specific purpose, or they don't enhance your audience's understanding of that, it may mean that you need to reconsider what you're identifying as the main points of your speech. Some things to remember also regarding main points is that main points should be separate, so you don't want them to overlap at all. You want them to each be separate from the other. You want to try to balance the time that you spend on each main point. This doesn't mean it has to be identical, but you can't spend 3 minutes on one main point and 30 seconds on the next. You want to balance that some. You want to use parallel structure, which means that the main points have some similar ways that they're organized, and maybe the phrasing that you use to introduce us to those main points. And then finally, you want to maintain a logical flow. So you want your speech to flow in a way that makes sense. And we're going to talk about some organizational patterns, but you want to make sure that it makes sense logically as you're going through the speech. In section 10.2 of your chapter, it goes over a variety of organizational patterns. I'm going to spend some time talking about the 3 that we're going to use in this class. And so there are 2 options for the informative speech, and then 1 for the persuasive speech. So for informative speeches, one of the most common organizational patterns is a topical organization pattern. And that just simply means that you have determined your main points based on many topics, or by chunking things together. So for example, if I were to talk about Pottsboro High School in my informative speech, perhaps my main points would be here are the faculty, here are information about the student body, and here's information about extracurricular activities. So I've chosen 3 main points that I want to talk about with Pottsboro High School. Chronological order, however, goes in time order. So you'll see this a lot with informative speeches that deal with events. So if I were to talk to you about the Super Bowl, maybe I start at the beginning and go to the end. A lot of times informative speeches about people also follow a chronological order. So they start at the beginning of their life and go towards the end. So how you determine which organizational pattern you want to use is largely dependent on your topic and what your goal is in the informative speech. For the persuasive speech, the organization pattern that we are going to use is problem, cause, solution. It's simple and exactly what it sounds like. So the first main point, you're going to identify the problems or the effects of the issue you're talking about. The second main point, you're going to look at those underlying causes. And then the third main point is to offer solutions to address the problem or issue that you're addressing. Some things that are important, if you are familiar with writing and in English, you know that you have to have transitions and paragraphs. That's also true in terms of presenting speeches. In fact, it's more important. Your audience doesn't have the written work in front of you, so you have to keep the speech as organized as possible, and transition statements help you to do that. And there are 4 basic types of transitions we're going to talk about. The first is transitions between main points, or just simply that, a sentence that lets you know we're moving from one main point to the next. Second are internal previews, which is a phrase or a sentence that gives an audience an idea of what is to come. So if I were to say, in chapter 10, we are going to discuss organizing, developing main points, and creating transitions, that's an internal preview. An internal summary reminds the audience of what they just heard. So you would say, today I've talked about how child slavery is a big issue, and now you don't have a reason not to act. And then signposts just help guide the speaker through the content of the speech. So they're organizational words like first, second, or third. They use parallel structure. If you look in chapter 10, it gives you some ideas of both transition statements and signposting that you can use. So that's basically chapter 10. We're going to talk about outlining more and organization more when we talk about chapter 12.